Imagine this, a packed stadium, 100,000 fans on their feet, the air thick with tension. The greatest strikers in the world charging toward goal, but one man stands in their way. Dressed head to toe in black, he moves like a shadow, reacts like lightning, and commands the field like a king. Strikers fear him. Fans adore him. And in the entire history of football, only one goalkeeper has ever won the Ballon d'Or, football's greatest individual prize. His name: Lev Yashin. But how did a goalkeeper, yes, a goalkeeper, break the golden rule of football? How did he achieve what no other before or after him has? This isn't just a story about trophies or accolades. This is about a man who changed the very DNA of goalkeeping. A man whose style was ridiculed, doubted, and even rejected, until the world had no choice but to recognize his greatness. Strap in, because this is the forgotten story of the Black Spider. But to understand his rise, you need to know where he came from. A young boy growing up in the Soviet Union, a nation built on discipline, control, and sacrifice. Yashin didn't start as a footballer. No. He was a factory worker. A teenager grinding through 12-hour shifts in a war-torn country, his dreams buried under the weight of survival. Yet, talent like his couldn't be contained. His first taste of goalkeeping: ice hockey. He stood between the posts, blocking blistering shots with nothing but instinct and reflexes. But then, football called to him. And the moment he stepped onto the pitch, something changed. This wasn't just another goalkeeper. He wasn't just stopping shots, he was redefining what it meant to play the position. Diving where others stood still. Catching when others punched. Commanding when others hesitated. He played with a boldness that had never been seen before. But despite his raw talent, Yashin was not an instant hero. Far from it. In his early days, he was mocked. Criticized. Even benched. They called him reckless. Too aggressive. Too unorthodox. He was ridiculed for coming off his line too much, something no goalkeeper dared to do at the time. But what if I told you that the very thing they mocked him for would one day change goalkeeping forever? At first, the criticism got to him. He doubted himself. Questioned if he was really cut out for this. He spent years stuck in the shadows, watching from the bench, waiting for his chance. And when it finally came, it was a disaster. In one of his first big matches, he made a mistake, a costly one. The press tore him apart. Fans turned their backs on him. Coaches lost faith. Most players would have crumbled. Given up. But Yashin. He did something different. He trained. Harder than ever. He studied every shot, every movement, every mistake. He became obsessed with being better. Stronger. Faster. And then, one day, it all clicked. He started making saves no one thought possible. He wasn't just reacting, he was predicting. Reading strikers before they even took a shot. He turned goalkeeping into an art form, moving with a confidence that made even the best forwards hesitate. Suddenly, the same people who doubted him were left speechless. And then, he did something that no goalkeeper had ever done before. He didn't just stand on his line, waiting for shots. He charged off it. He played as a sweeper keeper, rushing out to shut down attacks before they even began. It was risky. It was revolutionary. And at first, it was seen as madness. But soon, people realized it wasn't madness. It was genius. The critics were still watching, waiting for him to fail. They called him reckless, said his style would never work at the highest level. But Yashin wasn't just playing with instinct, he was playing with precision. Every dive, every save, every decision was calculated. He wasn't just stopping shots, he was outthinking the strikers before they even took them. He studied his opponents like a scientist, memorizing their habits, their favorite shots, their weaknesses. By the time a striker lined up to shoot, Yashin already knew where the ball was going. And then, there was his most legendary weapon, the penalty save. A moment where goalkeepers were supposed to be helpless, just a formality before the ball hit the net. But not against Yashin. He turned penalties into mind games. He stood there, tall, dressed in black, staring down his opponent like a hunter locking onto his prey. He didn't just react, he dared them to take the shot. Strikers stepped up, but instead of confidence, they felt fear. Because in front of them wasn't just a goalkeeper. It was Lev Yashin. And time after time, he denied them. It wasn't luck. It wasn't guesswork. It was mastery. No other goalkeeper in history had this kind of presence. No other keeper had this level of dominance. Yashin wasn't just changing how goalkeepers played, he was changing how strikers thought. He was inside their heads before the ball even left their feet. And the world was finally starting to understand. This was no ordinary player. This was something football had never seen before. But even then, no one could have predicted what would happen next. Yashin was no longer just a goalkeeper, he was a force of nature. Strikers didn't just plan for him, they feared him. His presence alone was enough to make even the best hesitate. But as his legend grew, so did the expectations. Could he do it on the biggest stage? Could he prove, once and for all, that a goalkeeper could be as important as a goal scorer? Then came the moment that would define him forever, the World Cup. The world was watching, the pressure was suffocating, and one mistake could destroy everything he had built. But Yashin didn't just step onto that stage. He owned it. Match after match, he pulled off saves that defied belief, leaping across the goal like a man possessed, stopping shots that should have been unstoppable. Commentators ran out of words to describe what they were seeing. Fans in the stands could only shake their heads in disbelief. The way he moved, the way he commanded the game, it was like watching a magician at work. But then, disaster struck. A single mistake. A lapse in concentration. The ball slipped through. A goal. And just like that, the world turned on him. The newspapers tore him apart. The critics who had waited in silence suddenly found their voices again. Had the great Lev Yashin finally been exposed? Was he just another goalkeeper after all? For the first time in his career, doubt crept in. Was this the end of the Black Spider? Or was it just the beginning of his greatest comeback? The headlines were brutal. The same people who once praised him now called him finished. Past his prime. A legend undone by a single mistake. For any other player, this would have been the end. A stain on their legacy. But Yashin. He wasn't just any player. Instead of hiding, he did the unthinkable, he faced the criticism head-on. He read every brutal article, every scathing remark. And then, instead of breaking under the pressure, he did what only legends do. He fought back. He trained harder than ever, pushing his body to the absolute limit. He studied every second of that mistake, every angle, every moment leading up to it. He refused to let one goal define him. And when he returned to the pitch, he wasn't just better, he was unstoppable. In the matches that followed, he pulled off saves that didn't seem human. Saves that defied physics. Shots that were destined for the back of the net, denied by a man who refused to be forgotten. His teammates saw it. His rivals saw it. And soon, the entire world saw it too. Lev Yashin wasn't done. Not even close. And then, when the world least expected it, football's greatest honor came calling. The impossible was about to happen. A goalkeeper was about to make history. The football world had seen greatness before: Pelé, Di Stefano, Puskas, names that echoed through the sport like legends. But there was one thing they all had in common. They were attackers. The ones who scored the goals, won the trophies, and took all the glory. Goalkeepers. They were just there to stop the inevitable. They weren't game changers. They weren't superstars. And they certainly didn't win awards meant for the best player in the world. But then, something happened that no one saw coming. As the votes for the Ballon d'Or, football's greatest individual prize, were being counted, whispers started to spread. The unthinkable was happening. A goalkeeper's name was rising to the top. A man who didn't score goals, who didn't dance past defenders, who didn't fit the mold of a traditional football hero, was on the verge of making history. And then, it was announced. The winner of the 1963 Ballon d'Or. Lev Yashin. The room fell silent. Then, the world erupted. A goalkeeper. winning football's most prestigious award, ***, it had never happened before. It would never happen again. Strikers had been celebrated for decades. But now, for the first time, football was forced to recognize something different, that sometimes the greatest player on the pitch isn't the one who scores goals, but the one who stops them. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Because Yashin's story wasn't over. It was about to take one final, unexpected turn. Lev Yashin had done the impossible. He had shattered the golden rule of football. The Ballon d'Or belonged to the goal scorers, the playmakers, the superstars. But now, in 1963, a goalkeeper held it in his hands. It was a moment that should have cemented his place as the undisputed greatest. But football is ruthless. Legends don't get to rest. As he stepped onto the pitch after winning the award, the weight of expectation was heavier than ever. Every striker wanted to be the one to beat the great Lev Yashin. Every critic waited for him to slip. Every game felt like a battle to prove that his golden trophy wasn't a mistake. And then, time did what it does to every player. His reaction slowed. His body took longer to recover. The saves that once seemed effortless became just a little harder. The whispers returned. Was Yashin finished? Had football finally caught up with him? He could have walked away. Retired at the top. But that wasn't who he was. Instead, he chose one last fight. One final stage to remind the world exactly who he was. The Black Spider wasn't done yet. He had one more moment left. And when it arrived, it would be the perfect ending to a career that had changed football forever. Lev Yashin had done the impossible. He had shattered the golden rule of football. The Ballon d'Or belonged to the goal scorers, the playmakers, the superstars. But now, in 1963, a goalkeeper held it in his hands. It was a moment that should have cemented his place as the undisputed greatest. But football is ruthless. Legends don't get to rest. As he stepped onto the pitch after winning the award, the weight of expectation was heavier than ever. Every striker wanted to be the one to beat the great Lev Yashin. Every critic waited for him to slip. Every game felt like a battle to prove that his golden trophy wasn't a mistake. And then, time did what it does to every player. His reaction slowed. His body took longer to recover. The saves that once seemed effortless became just a little harder. The whispers returned. Was Yashin finished? Had football finally caught up with him? He could have walked away. Retired at the top. But that wasn't who he was. Instead, he chose one last fight. One final stage to remind the world exactly who he was. The Black Spider wasn't done yet. He had one more moment left. And when it arrived, it would be the perfect ending to a career that had changed football forever. But even as Yashin stepped away from the game, his impact never faded. He wasn't just a legend, he was a revolution. Goalkeeping would never be the same again. The days of keepers standing helplessly on their line were over. Now, they commanded their box. Now, they studied their opponents. Now, they played with the confidence and aggression that Yashin introduced to the world. And his influence stretched far beyond his own era. From Buffon to Neuer, from Casillas to Alisson, every great goalkeeper that followed owes something to Lev Yashin. He changed the position forever, proving that a goalkeeper could be as valuable as a striker, as game-changing as a playmaker, and as legendary as the greatest footballers of all time. But even with all the records, all the trophies, all the history, one thing remains true: no goalkeeper has ever won the Ballon d'Or again, not a single one. Because Lev Yashin wasn't just great. He was one of one. The Black Spider, the man in black, the keeper who defied the odds and rewrote football history. And that's why, even now, decades later, his legacy remains untouched. Because some players are remembered. Some players are celebrated. But only a few become immortal.